Welcome, everyone. I'm Greg Stanley. I'm here with Wes Warren. The topic we have for today is quite often posed to us. Is this a good time to get out of practice? Should I stay in practice or should I get out now for some reason? Wes, what's been your experience?
Yeah, people ruminate about this even for years in deciding, is this a good time? And they come up with all kinds of rationales. Some of them legitimate, but I would say a lot of times, most of them are your mind really, I don't want to say playing tricks on you, but basically trying to confirm something that you want to do. So if you want out of practice, if that's what your burn, you just can't stand dealing with employees anymore and the headaches of practice, you'll make up a ton of reasons why it's right. That, when you really boil them down, they're not they're not real. And then the opposite, obviously, to stay. And so kind of it's pros and cons, and it really just comes down to where the doctor is at. For me, that's the most important part, where the doctor is at mentally in practice. Because there is no good reason to get out of practice. There's no math that works. Retirement, money, financials, uh, your uh, obviously cognitive abilities drop, when you got nothing to do, all kinds of negatives getting outside of practice. Uh, and so the only time that you go, okay, yeah, the only pro is when you're done. When I say you're done, you're burned out, you can't stand it anymore, you hate being there, you hate the employees, you start to resent the patients. When you get to that level, yeah, you're done. Or physically, you can't do it. Those are the two reasons I would say if you're at that point, I would agree with you. It's hard to argue that. It's hard to argue that.
Let's
But
look
the
let's look at it from another angle. Some people feel like they probably have enough energy and physical wherewith to stay in the saddle a bit longer. Questions come up like inflation. Everybody knows this is Milton Friedman. When the government spends more, prints more than it brings in, there's going to be inflation. And if we were to stay, for example, with the posture we have now as a country, we could see inflation go crazy. I have doctors who have Social Security, they bring in 4,000 a month in Social Security, and they just got their cost of living adjustment of 30 or $40. Like, hey, go knock yourself out. Here's a few nickels. Some people are worried about this and they think maybe I just stick with it. But here's what it means. If you stick with it, just like you said, it's probably going to wind down slowly. Its resale value will gradually evaporate like the water in the front yard during irrigation time. It just slowly starts to go away. Are you going to reinvest in the marketing, reinvest in the equipment, replace those lost staff, retrain a leader? If you're not ready to do that, your concerns about inflation and wanting to stay in practice, it really isn't one of your choices. I would say, yeah, inflation is the threat it's always been. But fortunately for us as a nation, in the past, yes, we've seen it this bad, but it did go away. It went away completely and for more than a decade. So whether this will continue, that's a dice roll. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about is your energy. You get up some days, you feel good, I'm gonna go to work. Man, I could do this forever until lunchtime, and you realize I better go lay down. And it becomes real to you that getting back in the saddle completely is not an option. Now, that's where some of the things we talk about with associates could come in, and you'd probably want to use more than one associate and explore the avenues of where you can get enough new patients affordably to keep them going. We can do that. Now, a couple things people look at is number one, what if I have a doctor? In other words, put all this aside that we've talked about, but I have an associate doctor ready to take over in his mind, not in my mind, but he wants to take over. He's been here 2 years. He's got a good following. The staff like him, the patients like him. if I did walk away now, he would probably provide me the exit that I'm looking for or that I would need. So if that's a consideration, I would throw that in the mix. But that said, let me say that if you have all these other concerns, if you want to go another way, don't let that trap you. Don't, if you really feel like you should stay in practice and wind it down yourself, don't hesitate. Wes, where does the money come from? In other words, uh, do we stay in practice and try to sell it for a higher level? Do we quit and sell it now for a higher level because the market's better? When do you get out? When do you stay in? What pays you the best?
Well, always staying in pays the best.
Okay.
So you've done this many times where you show, like, if you've lost half your income, but you stayed in practice 3 or 4 years, you actually come out the same, if not better, than if you were to sell now. It very rarely can you do the math, even with a dying practice, that you just throw the keys, that you come out ahead selling now. And then with all the risks of inflation in the marketplace, you're, I would say, at more risk there than you are in business. Invest, obviously, it's a scary scenario either way you go. But staying in practice is always comes out ahead. The thing that drives people to want to sell is this whole idea that they're getting tired, like you said. They can't go at the pace as they could before, and they need to wind down for physical reasons, really, and they don't know how, basically. And the whole idea of bringing on an associate seems like a headache that and a challenge that maybe they're not up for. And the other thing is the old retire and practice thing, where you consciously slow down the practice, you divert the right patients, you change the model of the practice so it's high value but low interaction, low hours, so that you can somewhat maintain the revenue or very close, but you're trimming back the hours tremendously. And that's the old retire and practice model. So there's two ways to go. So one is the associate route, where you're kind of in it in the sense that you're really trying to grow the practice. That doesn't mean that you're doing it, but you're actively trying to move the practice forward. The other is the retire and practice model. Both work. Both are financially way better than selling now. And so, yeah, those are the main options. One of the other ones that you alluded to was you got an associate and you sell them part of the practice. Maybe you sell them 25%, then you sell them another 10%, and you kind of do it in chunks until you get near 50%, and then you sell it all to them. And that could happen over a 4 or 5 year period where it's a slow transition. That's another option. So there are many different things you can do, but yeah, almost always it's hard to make sense of selling now.
Here's one of the
Financially, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Here's one of the energy issues. You have a pretty good day. You work pretty hard. You go home, maybe you're starting to go to bed a little earlier, but by the next morning, time to go to work, you're not quite rewound yet like you are on the weekend. That's a pretty good signal you're probably headed toward the energy cliff. And like I said, if you're going to do something with an associate, if you're going to make a change, now'd be the time to do it, because that's how you know the fuse is lit for you. Um, some of you wonder, I don't have enough money. I had a divorce late in the game. COVID set me back, any number of things. Well, like Wes said, you want to stay in the practice and wind it down. If it takes you 4 or 5 years, you'll get more money out of it than if you sold it at top dollar.
Yeah, I got a lot of doctors who they're not their goal, but the thing they say is, I'm gonna die at the chair. I'm gonna run this thing until I'm dead. And we got people doing it into their 80s. Now, granted, the practice has shrunk down, but they're still generating 100, 120, 130,000 of net income with atrophied practice, but they're still there. They're still doing it. So part of it is where you're at emotionally in dealing with business, the bump and grind of business.
You got to be
That
clear on something too, Wes. And that's this, it's just this simple. If you are going to stay there, kind of wind it down, you're going to wake up with, you need to repaint, recarpet, re-equip, restaff, new technology, incredible investment. And let's say you don't do that. You just take the money out. Don't think at the end you can sell that to a new doctor for top dollar. That's where we're seeing doctors really disappointed. I've seen doctors sell practices with 4 or 5 operatories, only one of them working. And they can find a kid that'll sign on for that because he doesn't know any different. And he realized later what happened. A lot of times they want out of that.
Yeah, winding down the practice and not reinvesting in it. And a lot of you are probably in that scenario right now where, yeah, you haven't really reinvested in 20 years, and everything is old. And the value of the equipment becomes almost next to nothing. The real value would be in the patient flow. And if you let that trickle down, then there's really no value, and you're selling files or charts, essentially at $50 a pop. So don't let it get to that scenario unless you're gonna just kind of ride it into the ground, that I'm gonna do it my way and I'm gonna do it for 5, 6, 7 years, and I know at the end it's gonna be basically worthless, but I'm gonna take out more revenue during that time period than I would by selling it now.
You know what? I think it'd be this simple. Give us a call.
Yeah.
Tell us where you are financially, where you want to be, where you need to be.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about the avenues forward that'll get you there. Like I said, can I tell you one of the real bad choices that we see come out of this? Remember I said doctor doesn't renew the technology, the space,
Yep.
the decor, and all of that. You know who there is who will predictably buy that? The child of the doctor, who unfortunately marries somebody who doesn't think that's a good idea. In fact, you really think about it, not many people were ever fixing up their practice so they could sell it. They were fixing up because they were
Themselves.
running and gunning, and there was excitement with new equipment coming along, new things. They loved the idea of having the practice all clean and new, and
Yeah.
that's motivation.
You don't buy a Mercedes because you want to sell it one day. You know what I mean? Like, that's not it's because you want a nice car. And if I'm going to drive all day long, I want to be in a nice car. Well, your practice is the same kind of way. And that's what motivates a lot of people to invest in the equipment. But this can catch you. So be aware of that. Yeah.
Get on the phone and let's talk through it and see which is the best path for you.
All right.
Thanks.